You don't need to be a tech person to care about cybersecurity.
It's more than just about protecting networks. It's ultimately about protecting people.
The human factor in cybersecurity often gets neglected, and we are here to bridge that gap.
Are you ready to get lost in Siberia with us? Welcome back to another episode of Lost in Siberia. We're your hosts, Annie May
And Annika.
And today we've got Iain Russell on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us, Russell.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, just called you Russell. This is what
Cut, take two.
what happens when you have a first and a surname that's also a first name.
I was just going to roll with it.
Yeah, you were just like, yeah, that's my
I was like,
name.
you know what? Let's just do it.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Okay.
I'm here incognito.
Yeah. So we've got Iain Russell on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us, Iain.
Thanks, anyway.
So I'm going to introduce Iain. Iain Russell is a cybercrime threat prevention leader and threat prevention director at Unfish, the merch,
Repping the merch.
where he focuses on disrupting scams, phishing, brand impersonation, and digital fraud at scale. With experience across defense, government, and the private sector, Iain works at the intersection of cybersecurity, financial crime, consumer protection, and threat intelligence, with a focus on moving beyond awareness advice towards real-world scam prevention and disruption. Lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So we have this thing on the podcast where we are working really hard to decipher acronyms, abbreviations, and big words in cyber. So saying this, we know that your work is spanning across many different industries, but obviously threat prevention is quite dominant across all of those. So for the sake of our listeners, did you want to maybe explain a bit what threat prevention is and how did you get there?
Absolutely. So we use the term threat prevention. We started with scam prevention, which was a little bit more specific, trying to prevent our customers' from being targeted by scams. But as the space kind of evolves and the threats targeting consumers become a lot more diverse with the introduction of AI and other things, we changed the terminology a bit to threat prevention. For us, what it means is, or what it focuses around is protecting, as I said, our customers' customers. So we're not necessarily always looking out for the organization itself. We don't look at perimeter protection or email security or anything like that. We're looking at using open source intelligence to find threats targeting or attacks targeting our customers. So trying to defraud them, to scam them, to steal money or credentials or whatever that is. So it's kind of broadened out past scams because it's not just scams anymore. There's so many other types of things that are targeting Australian consumers. But yeah, that was kind of the shift and why we've gone with threat prevention. I think it's like anything, isn't it? Like cybersecurity roles tend to have the weirdest names. People just make stuff up and hope for the best. So yeah, it'll probably change in a year's time, let's be honest.
Yeah. So an example of that would be, say, someone who is a customer of a bank and they get an email that says, hey, we've detected some unusual activity on your account. Click the link to verify that transaction or
Absolutely.
whatever. Is that the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very stereotypical use case. What we're looking at finding and removing there is not necessarily the email or the communication that goes to the customer, because trying to install protection onto potentially millions of customers' devices or email accounts is probably never going to happen, to be honest. But what we're doing is we use different data sources and collection methods to find and pattern matching, machine learning, some analysis to actually find the domain itself. And we remove the access to that domain. So we either remove the domain entirely through working with the registrar who they've registered the domain through, the hosting provider who's hosting the content. There's other disruption methods we can use that I won't go into, but we're essentially trying to stop once the customer clicks that link for them actually going through to where the intended recipient, where that actor just wanted them to end up, essentially. And it's not just across domains. We can do it across social media. We do it across application stores as well. So people hosting fraudulent apps. There was a big campaign think last year or the year before in Australia, targeting Australians, where an Indonesian crime gang had set up an app. When you downloaded it, it then executed remote access to your mobile device. And I think we were seeing thousands of them being downloaded a day. And all they have to do is whack a trusted logo onto the face of that app. People don't check things more than once most of the time. So what we're doing is we're not relying on the education of the consumer. We're not relying on people not clicking on the link. We're breaking the chain after that to make sure that even if they do engage or interact, harm can't happen at that next stage. Yeah, that's really what we were built around, because mass education is obviously incredibly important. Scam, fraud prevention education is massively important, but there's always going to be someone who gets caught out by something. So really our intent is to try and break the chain further down the line.
It really was evident to me. I think did we get to see your talk in CyberCon? I think it was at the same time as us.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian's
Yes,
talk?
Ian's
No, I think it was at the same time as ours.
Yeah, same time
Which
as your
was,
guy. Yeah.
Which was a real shame because I think you were talking about Nigerian prince scams, the OG email scams, and we were talking about Southeast Asians scam compounds. And it's becoming quite evident that, as you're saying, awareness and education is an extremely important part of threat prevention and scam prevention. In criminology, we would say that's like the victim save yourself. Yeah. It's your responsibility. And what's really admirable, I think, about the work that you do is that you're not stopping there. You're saying it's far than enough. We have to do something about that. And you've talked a lot about, we have a really different threat landscape now from the Nigerian prince scams, right? So did you want to talk a bit more about how different the current threat landscape is and why that awareness is just not enough?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think taking a step back slightly, so prior to starting in kind of the counter cybercrime space, I worked in Canberra for a couple of different consulting firms, doing cyber consulting into government, helped run teams, all that kind of stuff. And I think when you're looking at a sophisticated threat actor targeting, let's say, government, targeting defence, targeting home affairs, targeting any one of our sort of national interest portfolios or whatever it may look like, the intent of the attack is different. They're after information, or they're after data, or they're after classified documents, secrets, essentially. Yeah. Yes, I think the mindset needs to shift slightly when we're looking at people targeting consumers, because it's all about monetization. It's all about making a quick buck. So if you can break that at any stage along the line and make it too difficult for them to monetize, then they'll move on to someone else, or they'll move on to a different thing. I don't think they'll stop, but we can at least sort of prevent it. So I think that's kind of how the landscape has changed quite dramatically, is because it's so heavily about monetization. Back in the Nigerian prince scam days, you had to be reasonably, let's say, tech savvy to be able to execute on some of these scams. You had to speak English because, well, you had to speak some English to try and, write emails or communicate over the phone. You had to understand the basic principles of how to send out mass emails or hook up different phone lines and receive calls or whatever that may be. That's now completely not the case due to the rise of AI, online tool sets, things you can buy for $10 off dark web forums. Essentially, anyone can do this. Anyone can do this at scale. And because it's so successful, I think in a previous last episode, you said 2.7 billion lost to scams in 2023. Yeah. And that's just Australia. So,
in America, it's like 5 billion USD.
Yeah. I think I saw
2023.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat that was talking about over $1 trillion worldwide.
Yeah. It would be the third world's biggest GDP after China and the US.
Yes.
Or reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. Controversial.
Yeah, I was like, better clarify that.
So I think that's really the key point that especially when lawmakers or policy writers or people like us are trying to combat this threat. That's what we need to keep in mind. It's about money. It's about getting money into their pockets quickly. And I think that sometimes that kind of gets lost in when people think about, see this as a cybersecurity issue. It absolutely is a cybersecurity issue, but it differs to how we protect other assets, because they're after cash at the end of the day. So I think that the evolution of that, we're seeing the outcomes of that now. We're seeing mass campaigns being run simply by using generative AI. We're seeing, talking about Southeast Asian, the scam compounds. This is like industrialisation of fraud at scale.
It's a whole organised crime industry. Yeah.
And it's because it works. Yeah. It's so much cheaper and easier than peddling drugs or, doing other forms of crime. So what tends to happen then is the money that's sort of brought in through this pipeline then funds other things. And I think that's when it becomes a national security issue.
Yeah.
It's up until now, it's sort of been seen as a consumer affairs issue. It's mum and dad, it's nan and pop, it's their problem. Obviously, government's now picked it up with the scam prevention framework.
A good segue.
Yeah, segue. But funnily enough, it still doesn't go as far as seeing how this actually maps out across the chain and looking at this as it is, funding other forms of organised crime, potentially domestic terrorism or other areas of quite national significance. And Nigeria or West Africa is a great example. During my presentation at CyberCon last year, we talked about Black Axe, who are a crime group in West Africa. They actually use the funds from scam and fraud campaigns to fund their takeover of the Congo government. So we're seeing the pipeline of money go from, oh yeah, I've just stolen a couple of bucks from mum and dad, to we've now taken over a potentially somewhat democratic government with the funds that we've laundered and gotten through these pipelines. So I think that's how the landscape's shifting, and we need to adapt to that very quickly.
Okay, yeah, there was a lot in that. So we'll try and unpack that. So I think I do want to touch on the scam prevention framework, or is it scams? It's plural, isn't it? Scams.
I think it's singular.
Is it? I thought it was plural.
Oh, maybe.
I'm pretty sure it's scams with an S. But anyway, whatever.
I hope it's scams.
SPF. Yeah.
There's not just one.
Yeah.
Scam. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, because I was reading it last night. Unfortunately, it's a.
Yeah.
It's a riveting read.
Yeah.
All 4 pages of it.
Yeah. But there's so many things in it that, I talked about this recently in a video that we post on our YouTube channel, and I was actually watching back to the video that I made, and I was like, I think I was a bit too nice in the way that I spoke about it, because I was watching it back and I was like, I don't actually think it's that good. What was I talking about? I must have been having a really good day or something. But anyway, I love how it just opens up in the first sentence, which I don't know who wrote this, but the first sentence is just so bad. It's like, scams, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like, scams are an economy-wide problem that need an economy-wide solution. And I'm like, you just use the same...
I was going to say, that sounds like a ChatGPT sentence if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. And
it's not just a consumer issue. It's an economic issue.
Yeah. But I was like, you just use...
economy combined in one something.
But you just use the same adjective to use for the solution as you did with the problem. I'm like, how is... Anyway... But that's the least of the problems in this framework. But I love how also the next part was when it goes into what is not a scam. And this part's hilarious because there's literally a line that says scams are not when you are mugged or someone steals from, a thief, breaking into your home. And I was like,
that's AI.
What?
AI does it all the time. It's not this, it is this. And I'm like, I don't care what it's not. Tell me what it is.
Yeah, but I was like, but what, if you need to say that.
Yeah, in a policy document.
And the drawings in it, the diagrams, I'm like, what is it, a 5-year-old?
Oh, that was Paint. That was 100% MS Paint or...
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing is though, obviously when it says that businesses, basically the framework is about how, businesses need to take reasonable steps to combat this issue. And we all know when government says reasonable steps, that's code for we don't know how to solve the problem, so we really hope someone else does. I'd like to get your thoughts on, with the scams prevention framework, do you think it's actually going to achieve anything?
I think the intent behind it was good. Like, it started off as good intent, but there's a couple of obviously glaring issues. The first one, we kind of joked about it. The prevention framework's like, 5 pages long or something, maybe 3 pages of actual meat, with some accompanying documents. You look at the cybersecurity strategy or any of the other cyber elements done by government, and they're like hefty documents that they've spent months on,
and they're pretty.
Yeah, they're pretty. they're sent out to industry for collaboration on, and there's big announcements around them and all this kind of stuff. This has kind of flown under the radar a little bit. Like, it was talked about for a very long time. Then other things obviously became a priority, and this has been kind of dropped to the wayside. I think the last consultation period ended on the 5th of January, and we still don't have the industry codes for those 3 sectors that are supposed to come into effect in, I think, now 6 weeks' time. So there's no way that this is going to be in place on July 1.
Banks, telco, and digital media?
Some digital platforms.
Some digital platforms.
Some,
basically.
yeah. Some social, yeah. There's some means testing and other things like that in it as well. So look, I think probably the 3 glaring issues for me are, one, I think that it's been undercooked. It doesn't address the core issue of what's going on here, and the core issue is that Australian citizens are losing money. It focuses around the responsibility of organisations and reasonable steps, undefinable reasonable steps. I think it doesn't cover enough sectors to start with. You made a great point, and even though I think you were a bit nice the last time, things like dating platforms or sectors like superannuation or crypto. Superannuation, I think 26% of all of the scam victims in Australia are over 65. Most of those people will be living off their superannuation, and you draw it out of your superannuation account. And so where do we think this money's coming from? Like, yes, you can get the banks involved, but there's 25% of it's coming from superannuation accounts and things like that. So I think they need to spend more time on fleshing out the purpose behind the policy and what it's actually there to combat. The sectors are definitely way too light. And if they are starting with 3, fine, but tell us what's coming next. Show us the roadmap for, we're going to do these 3 now because it's going to tie into these 4 that we're going to bring in later, and what that looks like. And I think the other thing as well is that it's still being pushed as a consumer issue. You go on Scam Watch, you go on any of those sorts of, the National Anti-Scam Centre's website, all the places that people can go and get education on this from government. It's all consumer focused. It's all about, how do I stop myself from being scammed? Not what responsibilities do organisations, or should organisations have. The banking sector in Australia last year spent something like $2.5 billion on marketing to build trust with their customer base. But then they have no responsibilities around what they then do with that trust after they've built it. So I think that those 3 key points are probably the biggest ones for me. I also just think it's dropped off the radar now. It's not a priority. Anthony Albanese announced that $10 billion fuel package or fuel security package or whatever. Well, that could have been $7.5 billion if we could save consumers $2.5 billion in scams. So I think that there's a real underlying issue here that hasn't been addressed.
We've talked about building that trust, right? So brands are spending so much money so we can trust them, but they're not actually having any responsibility to make sure that this trust doesn't get exploited. Because, it's not our responsibility, it's the responsibility of the consumer. But we've spent so much money that they believe every word that comes out of our digital mouth. Yeah. And there's absolutely no responsibility on them whatsoever. And at some stage, you're going to start asking, what is the role of the government in this, right? And there are some examples internationally as well where, for example, I think you've talked about Thailand having a really easy government policy that they have implemented very quickly, where they said governments will just never send you emails, we will never send you any links in our communications. And it's such an easy way to disrupt something. versus a document that kind of doesn't cover much and is there for a purpose, but what's that purpose? Where are we going? At what stage do we say government needs to do better than they do? And at what stage do we say, why aren't we like other governments as well? Like, why can't we go and be like Thailand? Why isn't that a priority?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that uncovering another issue around the SPF there as well is that government's not included in it.
Yeah.
So government should be leading the way in this. This is what we expect from a government that we've got. Can we trust major corporations to do this out of the goodwill of their heart? Probably not. Let's be honest. We'd love if we could say, yeah, every bank in Australia is just going to put their hand up and go and spend money on this and not make this an issue anymore. The past has shown us that that's not necessarily the case. So government should be leading the way on this. But if you look at the government programs that are in place to combat this within government. So ASIC has a contract with a major UK provider to remove banking and investment scams. I dare you to go and do the analysis on the cost and the output of that contract. I'm not going to say what it is on here, but I dare you to go and look up the first 2 years or 3 years of that contract and then look at how many websites they removed.
I don't know if I want to look at.
No, trust me, you don't. And then the National Anti-Scam Centre has one as well, where consumers can report stuff to them and then a provider removes it. Other than that, there's nothing else. The ATO, probably one of the most targeted organisations in Australia, especially around tax time, nothing. Immigration and visa scams, huge for people trying to get into, come into Australia. Nothing. Services Australia.
Oh, and Services Australia is huge. Yeah.
And like all of these organisations that arguably everyday Australians engage with more than some of these other platforms that are being targeted under the SPF. And we're not seeing government lead the way in saying, yeah, we're going to do better. We're going to show you how you can do better. We're going to prove that it works. And then we're going to push it to industry and say, well, we've done it, so it's your turn to do it as well. So I think that's what we should be expecting. The other element of it is we know this has to be a policy first discussion because, as I said, we can't rely on organisations to self-govern when it comes to something as serious as this. But the policy has to be right because if you put in place something that doesn't quite meet the mark, then organisations are going to find ways of skirting around it. What's reasonable? If you look through that whole document, there's no definition of what reasonable is.
Yeah.
That's probably my take.
Because I've read about how in the UK, the banks actually have a responsibility to give that money back to the consumer. So it is on the banks to stop their customers from getting scammed, whereas we don't have anything like that. And yeah, as we've spoken about, it doesn't mention anything about crypto scams, super scams, and we know that those bad actors are coming after Australians, especially older Australians, because they know that they're the ones who can access that super, because they know that we can't access it until we're 65 or whatever the age is now, I can't remember. But do you think maybe the Australian government should then go look at what are other countries doing? Like, can we learn from them rather than being like, oh yeah, we're just going to put this shitty document out and that no one's going to read.
Yeah. Should they, or should they have done this already? Is this their entire job? I think, yeah, the UK has a great use case for banking. The EU has some really great legislation and frameworks around this. The EU tends to lead the world in this kind of legislation. Even the States has some stuff that's better than what we've got. I absolutely think that we could have just cherry-picked the best from everything. It goes back to talking about Nigerian print scams. When was the first Nigerian print scam? Like, probably 30 years ago, maybe? Yeah, exactly. When email was invented. So this is not a new issue. Arguably, this issue is older than a lot of the cybersecurity issues that we face today. Yeah. So why are we still talking about the same things? Why are we still treating this as something that it was 30 years ago? And yeah, why are we not taking advice from other places around the world who have maybe not fully cracked the code, but have found ways of making this effective and holding organizations to account?
What's very interesting as well is that we had this under 16 ban for social media, which shows that they can move fast when they want to, which actually Australia is kind of leading the way in this, because now we have other countries looking at us and implementing it. And I don't want to talk about it being like, oh, that's a good example, because even in this example, because it was rushed, right, policy on the run, policy on the done, there was a lot of scam implications. There was a lot of crime implications that are just not covered. What are we going to do about crime transference? I mean, in the physical space, like, where is youth going to go when they're no longer spending all of their time glued to their tablets and their phones and the social media? They're going to go back on the streets. We may potentially have increasing youth crime levels. So what are we doing to prevent that, right? Crime Prevention 101. And then when we're talking about scam preventions, we have so many different bad actors that will look at this legislation and say, okay, everyone is now expecting to provide verification. So is Australia even at that stage of forward thinking if we look at our scams prevention framework?
No, we're definitely not. The under 16 social media ban is a really great example of as you said, fast pushed through legislation that, again, did it against some pretty strict opposition. Yeah. There was some big voices out there that saying that this wasn't the way to go. And the government stuck to their guns, said that this is what they were going to do, delivered on that. So we know they can do it, but there is the possibility of this balance being tipped the other way for the SPF as well, where, we don't necessarily have the controls and everything else ready for them to execute on it. But I think that the issue is slightly different because consumers are losing money now. Mm-hmm. We have to do something, and we have to do something quickly.
And they are putting responsibility on these social media platforms to do it. So they're showing as well that you can put responsibility on all of these other domains that they haven't covered in the scams prevention framework. So where's this skewed, I guess, prioritization comes from? Maybe that's a bit of a hard question, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious. I'm like, but why does it happen? Maybe it's the wrong question, but maybe what can we do about it in the industry or in our day-to-day lives as professionals in cyber?
I think the reason why it's not shiny and new, that's the reason why this is not getting direct attention. Okay. So you look at a couple of years ago, all the data breach legislation that came out. Mm-hmm. We had Medibank, we had Optus, we had huge fines being issued, millions of people's data points lost or PII lost in those. In my opinion, that is less important than what is being done here, than scam prevention and fraud prevention. Because yes, okay, I lost my email and my password to this and my date of birth and possibly a driver's license number. Yep, that can be then turned into someone, defrauding me or whatever. But there's so many steps in that chain that have to happen before that's able to be done.
And you could also get those documents replaced as well.
And I can get those documents replaced. I can change my password.
You shouldn't have to pay for yourself, but
yes,
you
100%,
can get those documents
another
replaced.
issue. But but I think, when money is lost, I saw a really great example written up by the Scam Victim Alliance around, I think it was home loan or like a real estate scam, $220,000 lost and $6,000 returned. And so you look at the balance of the scales of economy of that. Surely this should be more of an issue than personal data. Personal data is bad, don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying that. But we're talking about like billions of dollars for Australians being taken and as we were talking about before the pod started, used for other things. This money goes to fund other forms of crime, other forms of domestic terrorism or other things around the world. But I think it doesn't get the attention because it's like we talked about. The first Nigerian print scam was how many years ago? People are kind of almost a little bit numb to it. It's like data breaches. You see one every other couple of weeks. Like even my parents don't call me anymore. And that's when you know that it's hit a point of, the average consumer being
so
kind
normalized.
of normalized and desensitized to it. So I think as professionals, the best thing we can do is be bringing this to the forefront, be talking about this with the people who it matters most. Like when we're having discussions in and around government, when we're having discussions in and around big corporations who should be responsible for these things, identifying this as a cybersecurity issue and identifying this as an issue that can be tackled, but also raising the point that there's a social element to this as well. Organizations, as we talked about, building trust, organizations almost have a social responsibility to their customers to be better at this. So let's do it. Let's be driving that conversation. Let's be the ones who are talking about it. I think that's the only way we get this back on the table.
Well, if we're talking about cybersecurity professionals to begin with, in terms of us being the ones to drive this, but then, for example, I always see people who are cyber professionals, and they're usually the first ones to kind of call people out for being the stupid ones, for falling for these types of scams. Right? I saw something the other day, someone posted on LinkedIn a screenshot of an email that he received, and it was someone pretending to be MyGov. And the post was about how he nearly clicked on the link because he thought it was legit as well. But the only sign that it wasn't was that in the actual email, everything was spelt correctly and looked like a government email. But the only thing was in the actual Gmail header, it had MG instead of MY. So that was the only thing to determine that it wasn't legit. And someone commented on the post and said, oh, didn't the MG give it away? And it's like, if you open an email and you're scanning stuff because you're having a busy day, who's going to see that?
The person who commented that clearly doesn't spend a lot of time at work. They need more going on in their life.
And I've asked a lot of people this, and especially who work in this, in this area where we are talking about scams, we are talking about social engineering. How do we actually get cyber people to change that mindset of just not being so judgmental?
Our industry has a horrific trait of basically like beating people down when they make mistakes or things happen. And I think that is something that, as younger cyber professionals, we have to make sure we don't carry through to sort of the next generation of leadership and as we move through our careers. Because it happens all the time, but there's so many cases of like I had a security consultant once who was many years experience fall for one of these, the classic, hey, it's your boss, can you go and do this task for me or whatever. Like social engineering, not just the capability of the individual scam, but the volume of them now means that even if you're like trying to read every email, even if you're trying to look at every the likelihood of one slipping through is so much higher now. I read a stat the other day to say that this year or last year, the number of domains registered worldwide was like the lowest it had ever been in terms of on its growth trajectory. But the number of scams was like significantly higher. Some sort of stat that basically showed that they were getting better with less volume. And I think as industry professionals, we need to look at this as the technical issue it is. Yes, there's a social engineering element to it, but this infrastructure still has to be set up. There still has to be a way of executing and monetizing the funds afterwards. There's still a kill chain present here. We call it cyber fraud kill chain instead of the cyber kill chain? Yeah. The Lockheed Martin one? Yeah. Sorry, I spent so long in fraud land now that I just, all my cyber knowledge is pushed to the back of my head. But yeah, I think as an industry and as industry professionals, we have to call out that behavior and we just have to be better because we are the ones that should be leading the way in this, not victimizing our own peers in this space.
Well, I did a cybersecurity and criminology degree. In my criminology class, I tried to write everything about cyber crimes and look at it from a criminal justice perspective. And what was very evident is that there was this very strict dichotomy between cyber-enabled crimes and cyber-dependent crimes. Yeah. And the cyber-dependent crimes then went into this is a cybersecurity issue, whereas a cyber-enabled crime was like, this is a crime thing, this is a economy issue, and so on and so on. And it's almost like we are too late now because now we have AI, and I have seen this coming around as well with AI-enabled crimes. How is this not a cybersecurity issue? And obviously, I know that you deal a little bit with AI-enabled crimes as well. Yeah. So both from an academia perspective and in industry and so on, isn't AI also a cybersecurity issue?
Yes. Short answer, yes. I think that the hilarious cyber-enabled crime versus cyber-dependent crime, there's two words in both of those that are key across both of them. It's right, cyber and crime. Funnily enough, they both are cyber issues because they both,
And they all involve people.
I think this is where we're seeing the mergings of industries happen So brand protection, counter scam, all that sort of, especially the BP space that used to be very heavily focused on, fraudulent domains.
Sorry, is that brand protection? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Excuse the acronym.
Like BP, like the petrol station?
Yeah. Brand protection space, which used to be very focused on taking down fraudulent domains. So someone registers qantas1.com and then, you go, okay, well, that's obviously not owned by Qantas.
Yeah.
Remove that domain. And the merging of cybersecurity, I think that as an industry, we need to accept that these worlds are coming together. We also need to stop making up more terms. AI-enabled crime, seriously? What's not AI-enabled now? Are we gonna? Do I now have to call my emails AI-enabled emails because Claude AI first? Because Claude helped me write them. I just think that in order to almost water down the issue, we're breaking it up into smaller parts. Mm-hmm. If we can go, oh well, that's actually AI-enabled fraud, and this one's cyber-enabled crime. Oh no, but all of these losses, they're not actually cyber-enabled crime, they're cyber-dependent crime, and that's looked after by a different area. We're compartmentalizing it out to make sure that we don't see this as the glaring issue that it is. The other key point is that we know that law enforcement can't keep up with this. If government policy can't keep up with it, how are we expecting our law enforcers to then keep up with it as well? So I think we saw when cyber moved from being IT security to cyber security and then evolved from being a very technical driven profession to some of all of these other parts. I've heard some great presentations from yourself talking about all the other areas of cyber that there is. We have to accept one more, funnily enough. We have to evolve and change. And as an industry that realistically evolves on the daily, we seem very resistant to letting other things come into our portfolio. And unfortunately, the reality is this has to be one of them. And it goes back to what we were saying. This is the conversation we should be driving. Bring this into us, make this a cyber issue, and we'll do a better job of dealing with it than others will, because we're used to it.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably a good place to end, but just wanted to ask, what's the biggest thing you'd like to see change in the next, 12 months is a bit ambitious, but...
I'd like a scam prevention framework Hey, government, if you're listening...
Do you think they deliberately named it SPF because of,
the sunscreen?
Yeah.
I thought exactly the same thing.
Literally the first thing I thought of when I saw it, because obviously, as an Aussie, we grow up, knowing so much about how dangerous the sun is, that I was like, but then it almost made the framework even more disappointing because of how bad it was.
It was like SPF 15 plus, when what we need is 50 plus, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if we could get an SPF 50 plus, that'd be great.
We're essentially putting coconut oil on our body at the moment and cooking in the sun.
We're just putting oil on ourselves and hoping we don't die.
I actually thought exactly the same thing when it came out. I was thinking is there some subliminal messaging here around the barrier between you and the outside world, or
it has legs. It has legs, though.
Yes.
You can use it.
Play on it.
You can use it.
There we go. Bit of free marketing advice, Australian government.
Slap, but make it fraud, make it cyber, make it use it.
There we go. We don't even need a plug. We just. But I think that in terms of direction for Australia, we need good, solid legislation. And if that means a delay, which it's going to mean, think of the cost of that delay. If we're now looking at a January 2027 implementation, that's another potentially...
How many millions of dollars?
How many billions of dollars,
exactly.
Lost in that time. So I think that has to be on the mind of policymakers as we're going through this. But we need that legislation, and we need it to be correct, because we all know correcting legislation after it's been put in is a lot more challenging than it is getting it right the first time. But yeah, that's probably my key takeaway.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Iain, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And thank you, our listeners, for joining us for another episode of Lost in Siberia.
Cool. Bye.
Excellent podcast name, by the way.